forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
And greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Deace alongside my co-host, Aaron McIntire. Good to see you, brother. How you been?
Doing all right. Watched a lot of basketball.
Indeed. I mean, I overindulged, came back, overindulged some more. I made up for not having it last year. Let's just put it that way. All right. I mean, I watched replays. I watched old games when the other games weren't going on. So I've watched quite a bit. And of course, the NCAA Tournament, what I believe, even though, football is the best of the sports in our opinion, but I think this is the best sporting event we have each year. And of course, it takes center stage right now, and it will in the Big Five on Bigger Ten. Let us begin. What was that? What happened? From 9 teams to 1. From 9 teams to 1, the Big Ten, the first conference ever to get 2 number 1 seeds and 2 number 2 seeds in the same draw. 3 of those teams are now gone. In fact, take a look at these numbers. Almost 25% of all of the NCAA tournament bids this year, is like 24.3%, went to 2 leagues, the Big Ten and the Big 12, yet combined, those 2 leagues have only sent 2 teams to the Sweet 16, each of them sending their regular season champions, Michigan and Baylor. And there's a lot of interesting theories out there. Is it because of the officiating? Lets the Big Ten get too physical? The grind that was the Big Ten tournament? Well, to me, I think you've got to go back, Aaron, and look at recent performances to find out if something's an outlier or systemic. All right. So last NCAA tournament we had, 2019, the Big Ten went 13-8, put 3 teams in the Sweet 16 and 1 in the Final Four. All right. So to me, this is nothing systemic. So then what was the outlier that could explain what occurred this year? Well, you look at this year's Big Ten, from Luka Garza to Hunter Dickinson to E.J. Liddell. This was a league this year, Travion Williams at Purdue, driven by big men, old school. And if you look and you know the history of this tournament is that it's driven by guard play. This was not a great year for Big Ten guards. One team was loaded at the guard position and had an inexplicable loss we'll get to here in a moment. But I really think that's the issue. I mean, you look at the lack of quickness in Iowa's backcourt. They can't really defend the backcourt at all, but they're great on the wings. Obviously have an all-time generational great in Luka Garza. You look at Ohio State, they're okay. But Dwayne Washington is a scorer. They don't have a great point guard. They're not a great defensive team. You look at Michigan, you got a guy who was playing for Columbia last year as your point guard. Eli Brooks is coming alive now, but I mean, he's been a role player pretty much his entire career. Michigan's best players, Franz Wagner, Isaiah Livers, Hunter Dickinson, all guys on the wing or in the post. Same thing with Purdue. You go right on down the line. It wasn't a great year for guard play in our league. I mean, point guard is what kept Michigan State, from almost missing the tournament this year. I think that's the issue. It just we got caught in a year where our league was driven by big men. This tournament's driven by guards, and we got our comeuppance in the tournament. But what are your thoughts, Aaron?
I agree. That's part of the problem here, part of the issue with the tournament. I still believe. Laziness does not hardly ever equal good analysis, but laziness doesn't always mean wrongness as well. I think the lazy take here 100% of the way is the officiating. I don't think that's wrong, though. Okay, I think there's a difference between just falling back, it's the officials, because that's the excuse after every game, after every season, after every non-conference
Meaning we get
season.
the clutch and grab in our league, and it inflates our defensive analytics and stuff like that.
Exactly,
right? Okay.
Yeah. But I think when you look at some of the other leagues, I look at the Pac-12 this year, man. Did you watch any Pac-12 games this year?
I did watch a little bit, yeah.
I don't want to say it's a night and day difference, but there is a difference. It's like those guys are actually used to being able to run up and down the floor with more confidence and not looking, this way or that, looking for an elbow or a chicken wing every night. So I do think that has some difference here, but I think in this particular tournament, I think this is the more rational explanation. I still am a firm believer, even though it's been this way forever, at least since I can remember, something's got to be done about the officiating in the Big Ten. Something's got to be done about the officiating. It's not nearly as much fun. The first 18 minutes of the Iowa-Oregon game, that was fun to watch. That was a lot of fun to watch. Mm-hmm. I would like it if things maybe looked more like that, but I think overall your analysis is correct about this particular year.
Especially when you look at, we lost to several double-digit seeds, right? And so even if you want to say some of the analytics were inflated this year because of the conference-heavy schedules, and Ken Pomeroy came out with a patch on his analytics, right before the tournament to kind of compensate for that, still, it doesn't explain the systemic faceplant that we just saw. And if you look at all those teams that lost, with one exception, all of those teams that are out, with one exception, have one thing in common. They don't have a great amount of quickness and athleticism in the backcourt. They don't have a great point guard. Which brings us to the Steve Carell this week's yikes, okay? Now, we did our tournament breakdown last week, and props to you, brother. You pegged Loyola of Chicago upsetting Illinois in round 2. I sounded the warning siren that this was going to be a tough game. Loyola was top 10 overall at Ken Pom, but we just talked about conference-heavy schedules. This was not a great year in the MVC, and that was the majority of their conference. But they had something, or the majority of their schedule, but they had something the typical mid-major upstart, unless it's a Gonzaga kind of upstart, doesn't have. And that is a presence in the middle with Cameron Krautwig that can at least challenge Kofi Cockburn so that they don't have to double team him and they can play him straight up. So I'm not surprised. Porter Moser's a good coach. We saw him take the Ramblers to the Final Four just a few years ago. I'm not surprised they scared Illinois. I'm really not even so much surprised they beat them. I'm extremely surprised at the way that they beat them. Now, I'm not even an Illinois fan, all right? And as a Michigan fan, Michigan and Illini fans have been, sniping back and forth the last few weeks. Who's the legit champion? Who's not? Blah, blah, blah. The reality, though, is the last few weeks in our league, Illinois has played the best basketball. They just won the conference tournament. They were on an overwhelming majority of ESPN Bracket Challenge submissions to be in the Final Four. They were a number 1 seed. Last 2 times they were the number 1 seed in the Midwest. They went to the Final Four, 2005, 1989. And they're the one team in our league this year, Aaron, that has high-level, elite-level athleticism and quickness in the backcourt. Ayo Dosunmu, Trent Frazier, and Andre Curbelo, who really came on once the calendar came to March. To see them, though, make no adjustments. If I'm an Illinois fan, I'm losing my damn mind. I think that's one of the worst early round upsets a Big Ten team has suffered in recent memory. I think it's close to Michigan State losing to Middle Tennessee in the first round in 2015. It's just that game was in the first round, so maybe not. But it's not, again, that they lost, and it's not to take anything away from Illinois-Chicago, Aaron. But when you watch that game, didn't it seem like Illinois thought, hey, it's not a single elimination event? They never ever. You expected them to press when they got behind, but they never even did that. They didn't feel the pressure. It was just a lackadaisical tone the entire time. I couldn't believe that Brad Underwood did not play more of a pressure defense on the perimeter with his quickness advantage to try to create more turnovers. Didn't do that. How many times did we watch them run that high ball screen and they got blown up? They got so bad that the last 5 minutes of the game, Bill Raftery was basically begging Illinois. Did you hear him saying that? He was basically begging Illinois, stop running that. Okay? I mean, Porter Moser had a great game plan. Okay. And it gets really great when the other coach lets you just play it the whole 40 minutes and never adjust at the half. That was one of the worst coached NCAA tournament games, given the talent level I have ever seen in the history of the Big Ten.
I was only able to watch about the last 2 minutes of that game, so I was not able to see all the body language and things of that nature. I will just tell you, though, watching, I was keeping track, though. I was paying pretty close attention, though, just watching the stats roll in on ESPN. Loyola never trailed that game. Never. Not once. They never trailed that game. They did to Illinois what Illinois did to Iowa during the Big Ten tournament. Just kept it between 8 and 14
just kept them on a string.
Just kept them on a string the entire game. That's not acceptable. I don't think if you have the talent that Illinois has, that's not acceptable in the least bit, especially if it's not even your little brother. They shouldn't even be on your radar. They shouldn't be on your radar at all. And so just to watch that come in, I'm like, something is gone. Did I miss an injury or something? Is Kofi Coburn? Did Io DeSunmu, did he break his face again? I was trying to figure out what was going on there and filling in that other part of it. One, where's the urgency? And two, where's the coaching changes? That was another familiar theme in a different game as well. The Rutgers game. Mm-hmm. What
another poorly coached game. And I have a lot of respect for Steve Peichel. You have to with what he's done at Rutgers, okay? But why are you going into a stall? You're up by 9 with 6 minutes left, brother, not 2 minutes. Again, this is another situation where the color guy on the broadcast is like, what are you doing? You can't do this. And so they ran the shot clock down. They got into the same problem we talked about last week Rutgers did, where they have really good players, but not enough guys. They don't have the kind of guys that at the end of a game just hand them the ball. At the end of a shot clock, they get a bucket. And they didn't score. They ended the game on a 16-2 run. Houston did at the end of that game. I mean, that was just a flat-out choke by Rutgers. There's no other way to describe it. They just choked. Total
choke job. And I'll say, I was watching the Arkansas game on day one of the tournament, and I cannot remember who they played day one. They were down. Colgate, thank you. They were down like 14 points.
It was 33-19.
Yeah.
I know. That was one of my upset picks, and it didn't pan out.
They were down 14 points to Colgate in the first half. And what they did, they went on like a 16-3 or 4 run to end that half, and they went to the half with the lead because they were like, "Oh bleep, we're going to get blown out here by a Colgate team." I didn't see that urgency from Illinois. I didn't see that urgency from Rutgers, and I don't understand that whatsoever.
If I'm Illinois, man, I got a lot of questions for Brad Underwood. I mean, a lot. When are they going to have better personnel than they had this weekend? I mean, you have a man-child center. You have a first-team All-American lead guard. The two other guys, Curbelo is an explosive player. Frazier is experienced, has hit so many big shots. I mean, when were you going to have better personnel than what you have right now? And again, it's not so much that they lost, and if they would have lost like 54-52 and shot 30%, you just tip your cap to Loyola and say, hey, man, it's the way that they lost, that lack of urgency. That would bother me if I were an Illini fan. Which brings us to the lone survivor here. Only one team is moving on, and that's Michigan. And for a lot of that game on Sunday night, it didn't look like that, or Monday night, it didn't look like that was going to happen either. Wolverines trailed 18 of the first 20 minutes of the game before eking out a 1-point win at the half, trailed by 10, 5, 6 in the second half, and then about the 8-minute mark of the second half, for the first time in a few weeks, and with no Isaiah Livers, we saw the team we saw much of January and February in the Big Ten, and they really turned it on and defeat LSU and move on to the Sweet 16. Michigan and Gonzaga, the only teams in college basketball that have gone now to 4 straight Sweet 16s or more. But a lot of people doubting Michigan again, expecting them to lose to Florida State in the regional semifinal on Sunday, or maybe to Alabama in the regional final. Aaron, your thoughts on where Michigan stands?
Depends on which Florida State team shows up. I think if it's the Florida State team that lost at the end of the season to Notre Dame, then I think you'll be set. And I don't know. It's been an interesting year in the ACC, to say the least. Good on Michigan for saving some face for the Big Ten, at least one of 9 faces for the Big Ten. What can you say? I hope for Big Ten's sake that Michigan wins. I think they have a better chance than a lot of people are giving them, given their matchup with Florida State. It's just, can Juwan Howard make adjustments in game? It seemed like for most of that Michigan game on Monday night, he was not able to, but he did when it mattered the most. So it's going to be a challenge, obviously, for Michigan. But I think it will come down to don't be like Brad Underwood and Steve Peichel. That's basically his job. That's basically his job against Florida State, and I think the rest will take care of itself.
Florida State's an interesting team, longest team in the country, but they had 2 chances to win the ACC down the stretch. And they were favored both times and lost, and I know because I was on them both times. I mean, you had a chance to win the regular season title. They don't do that a lot at Florida State. And they played Notre Dame last game of the year. Notre Dame is not good. They really kind of dominated that game. And then they lost to Georgia Tech in the ACC tournament final. So, I mean, their analytics are great. When they get, they're what they call a get off the bus team, if you know what I'm saying. When Florida State gets off the bus, you're like, hey, those are the national champions right there. But then they have some face planting losses that you just can't explain. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens when those teams hook up on Sunday. All right, we have a new coach in the Big Ten. Well, another one. Penn State hired a new coach, former Purdue assistant. I think it was Purdue's offensive coordinator. But this is a curious hiring from Minnesota. They fired Richard Pitino, who already landed at New Mexico, which is a really good mid-major job, actually, in order to hire his former assistant, who was there for 5 years, was his chief recruiting assistant, and previously played at the school, has no head coaching experience, though, and comes over as an assistant at Xavier in the Big East Conference. If you're a Minnesota fan right now, first of all, why don't you at least wait till the tournament is done? You could have hired Ben Johnson 2 weeks from now. Why don't you wait till the tournament is done and make Porter Moser tell you no, right? At least make him tell you no. Why not wait? But if you're a Minnesota fan, can you say right now for sure that you just upgraded your coaching position with this move?
I don't think so. This must have been in the works for a while. It's like Iowa State in the Big 12 hiring TJ Onselberger. He has some good recruiting experience. He's got ties to the school, but you're kind of in the same type of position, minus the historically bad season that the Cyclones just endured. Whereas you're not necessarily making the big dance on a consistent basis. So you kind of have that excuse built in. Well, it can't get really that much worse.
Right.
But at the same time, you're going for upside all the time. It seems like with some of these hires, and if I could just parlay that into the next topic as well, with Iowa giving Fran McCaffrey an extension. Iowa is in no man's land right now with McCaffrey, because on the one hand, fairly consistently he's making the tournament. Right? Yeah, he's making the tournament. Is he getting to the Sweet 16? Is he taking them to levels they haven't been for upwards of 20 years, basically my entire lifetime? No, he's not doing that, but he is making the tournament, and he's playing an entertaining brand sometimes of basketball. So you can't really get rid of him because you don't want to go back into the Todd Licklider years, the dark years. But at the same time, you're not really going to the places you want to go. Minnesota didn't really have that problem. They're like, okay, this guy has upside. We missed the tournament. We're not making it on a consistent basis. Let's just take a gander here.
Fran McCaffrey, 11 years at Iowa. His extension is going to take him throughout most of this decade. 11 years at Iowa, 586 win percentage, 3 NCAA tournament wins. Hasn't been, or 4 NCAA tournament wins. Hasn't been outside of the first weekend. In fact, Iowa as a program hasn't escaped the first weekend this century, not since Tom Davis's last year in 1999. So a 586 win percentage, 4 NCAA tournament wins in 11 years. And that gets you an extension that lasts almost the decade? I don't understand that. I don't. Especially, you got to ask yourself, how much better are you going to get without... You had the National Player of the Year. If you can't get it done with him, tell me where we're going here. I mean, I'm not saying you fire the guy after this season. I just don't. What was the hurry to extend him until I'm drawing Social Security? What was the hurry to do that?
Well, alternate analysis that I've heard people give before with a different sport. Fire Kirk Ferentz with Iowa football. I hear a common refrain. Well, who else are you going to get? You're Iowa. So according to the analysis that I just gave you, which is no man's land, you're kind of in no man's land. You're making the tournament. I think Iowa right now is just stuck in this. You're always a guard or two away. Now, Jalen Suggs is going to be starting on an NBA team someday, very soon, probably. But imagine Iowa with a Jalen Suggs. Can you? I mean, that would be, you would think anyway, you'd think that would be a top flight team. You'd think that would be a consistently top 5 team anyway.
Right.
You're just stuck kind of in this no man's land. So does he deserve
basically,
it?
Iowa's administration, it buys into, well, we're Iowa, is what I hear you saying. And hey, that may be self-awareness. I don't know, but again, my generation, I grew up in the 80s and 90s when, Iowa was ranked number 1 in the country. Iowa never lost in the first round. Iowa went from Lute Olson, well, then there was George Raveling, to, it was a consistent top 25 team. So I've seen, now I also covered, as you well know, up close the Alford era, and this looks a lot like it, just without the drama. I mean, in terms of the record and stuff, it's very similar, just without all of the drama that Alford produced. But it sounds like the administration at Iowa, to me, Kirk Ferentz is going to be a college football Hall of Famer. I get that people compare those two, but the job Kirk Ferentz has done, it's not even close compared to what Fran has done. In 11 years, 586 with 4 NCAA tournament wins in 11 years. I wonder, let's do this. Name another school in the Big Ten other than, say, Penn State and Northwestern. Nebraska, okay, which Iowa has a superior program to those 3. All right, so let's take those 3 programs off the table. Is there another school in our league that would give a coach this long of an extension for going 586 in 11 years with 4 NCAA tournament wins? I don't believe there is.
Is there another school in the conference with an athletic director named Gary Barta? No, well, I don't think there is. That can answer the question.
I
resent the notion, and I always have when others have said it on podcasts as well. Well, you're Iowa. What do you think you're going to get? Because that's been brought up.
It's beyond condescending.
It's incredibly
You're Loyola Chicago. What do you think you're going to get? You're Marquette. What do you think you're going to get? I mean, screw you with that crap.
I think though, Iowa is, again, they're stuck. They're in no man's land. Would you? So you said yourself, don't fire him.
I wouldn't fire him right now.
Does it warrant
an
an extension?
Yeah.
Well, tell me in 2 or 3 years. Gary Barta has been handing out incredibly great.
It's like Gary Barta doesn't want to make decisions, and so he puts himself in a position not to.
I think that with Iowa, you're just like donkey, stick, carrot, and that carrot is a 6'1" a super athletic point guard. Basically, that's where the Iowa basketball program is right now. Not to take away anything from Jabo or even some of the development in Joe Toussaint this year, but it seems like it's stuck in that phase where they're not going to be competitive in the tournament without a very athletic point guard. And until that happens, until Fran McCaffrey, I don't know why he's not been able to recruit one like that so far. But until that happens, it's kind of going to be, at least in the NCAA tournament, stuck in neutral.
I mean, forget Jalen Suggs. If Luka Garza was a 6'3", 6'4" point guard, instead of a center, we'd be having a completely different conversation, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Good point. All right, we'll come back, play our weekly game of Would You Rather here next. All right, time for Would You Rather here on Bigger Ten. And Aaron, this first one is for you. Would you rather be Brad Underwood at Illinois or Chris Holtmann at Ohio State right now, as in who has the more embarrassing loss to explain away for the next 8 months? Losing to Loyola of Chicago in the round of 32 as a number 1 seed, or losing to plucky Oral Roberts as a 2 seed in round number 1?
I think it's, man, this is difficult because I don't want to throw shade at Loyola. I picked them. But I would say This is really hard, actually. This is actually really hard. I think it's got to be Brad Underwood. You have all that talent, and you just folded. You just flopped. You never really were in the game. Let's just be honest. The Illinois was never in that game.
Loyola never felt any pressure really at all.
No. Yeah. That's on you, man. You should have been getting. I don't know what to say. That's on that coach, and so that's more difficult. You've got Io, Coburn, and a great host of guards. That's I don't know what to say. So I think that's more hard to explain. Bowing out to a 15 seed in round one, that's pretty difficult to explain.
Losing to the fourth place team in the Summit League.
Yeah, that's pretty difficult to explain too. But at least they made it to the Sweet 16. So. This next one's for you. Would you rather be an Illinois fan, an Ohio State fan, or an Iowa fan right now?
We're talking basketball, I assume? I think I'd rather be an Ohio State fan. Because as an Illinois fan, I'm looking at my mortality right now. I'm thinking it is highly likely Brad Underwood never has a better team than this. Because again, we're talking about a team that hadn't been a number one seed since 2005. Hadn't been to an NCAA tournament since 2013. Doesn't mean you won't have other good teams or other teams capable of making to the Final Four, but you got to be thinking if you're an Illini right now, when are we going to have a better team than this? And this is what we got out of it. And then you look at the Iowa situation. I think I get what you're talking about. I feel it as a Michigan fan in football. We're in a lukewarm hell, right? So I understand the situation that you just articulated. But if I'm looking at ceiling, if I'm an Ohio State fan, I'm disappointed with what happened against Oral Roberts. But I'm looking at what Chris Holtmann has done, taking over late in the game for an ill Thad Matta. And now there's some reports out there that he was going to get the Indiana job, but failed to physical.
Yikes,
So who knows? But I took over late in the game. I fashioned together a team, with Band-Aids that we ended up making the NCAA tournament. We had a grinded out team the first couple of years. This year, we didn't have that kind of personnel, so we changed and opened up the floor, and we outscored more teams. And I'm looking at my recruiting base. I'm looking at my facilities, my recent tradition. I'm looking at a coach that has shown a lot of ability to adapt. I'm thinking I'm disappointed, but I haven't hit my ceiling yet. If I'm an Illinois fan and if I'm an Iowa fan, I'm concerned that I have hit my ceiling under these coaches already. So that's why I would go with Ohio State. All right, for you, would you rather be Greg Gard replacing all those seniors next season or Fran McCaffrey replacing Luka Garza?
I'd rather be Greg Gard replacing all those seniors because at least then you have the excuse of, well, we've got a bunch of fresh faces, whereas Iowa has a few players coming back. I think Wisconsin... I think something was a little amiss with the chemistry on that team. Mm-hmm. I think being able to dump that out and kind of start a new vat is going to be beneficial for them. For Iowa, I really don't know who your go-to guys are next season, which might actually make the team a little bit better. Because it seemed like there were some nights where it was just the Luka Garza show, and that was just all that was keeping them in the game. Because you had 2 or 3 guys that just couldn't get a shot going, couldn't get open, couldn't whatever. It was Luka Garza and ... So I would rather be Greg Gard. This final one is for you. Would you rather have not made the tournament at all or get dominated by a clearly inferior team?
As somebody whose proud program spent a decade not making the NCAA tournament, I still can't believe I lived through that. I cannot believe I lived from 1998 until 2009. Michigan did not make the NCAA tournament once. Not having the hope of Selection Sunday and everything else. I got to tell you, brother, it ain't even close, man. That was a dark, dark time. I would rather make it every single time and take my chances. I mean, no matter all the heartbreaks, missing out all those years just was ball crushing. So yeah. So give me the smoke.
So you would rather get kicked in the balls than have your balls crushed.
Yes. But if we play it out through Selection Sunday and to the game day, my balls last a little bit longer. If you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
Than just getting crushed right away. Yes. All right. We'll come back. That was a weird conversation. We'll come back. Our Twitter poll results as well as our feedback of the week is next. All right, Aaron, I got to get your reaction to this Twitter poll. What happens first? We asked this audience, and man, this vote was close. Michigan beats Ohio State in football, or Iowa makes it to the Sweet 16 in basketball. 52.4% voted for Michigan to beat Ohio State in football. 47.6% voted for Iowa to make the Sweet 16. That would have been my vote because, I don't believe that Michigan will ever beat Ohio State in football ever again. But your thoughts on this week's poll as a question and then the results.
Oh, it's definitely Michigan beating Ohio State in football first.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you have a shot every single year.
No, we don't.
Narrator,
no, we don't.
Whereas with Iowa, you have to play a good season, get into the tournament, win one game against a good team, win two games against a good team.
I get what you're saying. So that game is scheduled every time. So statistically, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. So that's the correct answer.
Okay. I would have still voted for Iowa. This week's feedback of the week from Mike R. Let's stick with the Hawkeye theme. He is laying it down with a bold-ass prediction. Iowa will be in the Sweet 16 next year. When you look at next year's team, you're going to have, to me, Wieskamp and Keegan Murray are your alpha scorers on next year's team.
I don't think Wieskamp's going to be back. That's the general consensus.
Really? Anyway. I thought he had announced he was going to come back.
Really?
Yeah, I thought he announced he was. But let's assume that he does. Wieskamp and Murray, I think, are your alpha scorers on next year's team. What does Bohannon do? Does he take the COVID year and come back? What does he do? Or is he done?
It's hard to say. I don't really see that many prospects for him. Not that he's terrible or anything. I'm not saying that. But I don't really see that many pro prospects for him, so why not? That's essentially.
You have both the McCaffreys and the younger one with a year off removed from the cancer and everything else. His body type, he was a big-time recruit. I think he's got a ceiling there. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think they'll piece together a decent starting five and the kind of starting five that could be an NCAA tournament team. But am I wrong in that I'm kind of looking at an Iowa team that will just be without Luka Garza but have the exact same weakness, right?
In terms of quickness, athleticism,
yes.
I think that's a fairly likely assumption. The thing is as well, though, Garza, not that quick. Not saying he was necessarily a liability in transition all the time. So that you might get be a little bit quicker at that position. Keegan Murray, better defender than I think any of the wings.
Yeah, assume he takes a big step forward next year. I like his game
in the starting lineup. But if Wieskamp doesn't come back, it's going to have to be C.J. Frederick, and he's got to get more selfish. He's got to be the alpha. And so based on he was dealing with injuries as well towards the end of the season, but based on what I saw towards the end of the season as well, he's got to get more selfish.
To me, if Wieskamp does not come back, you're not an NCAA tournament team.
Agreed.
If he does, then I think you're probably at 8 to 10 seed, depending on where you finish in the conference, what next year's schedule is. But just looking at your talent profile, that's what I would guess. You're an 8 to 10 seed. You're assuming Murray takes a step forward to compensate for some of Garza's scoring departure, but you're basically this year's team without Garza, an improved Murray, but the same weakness. Take Wieskamp off with a nearly 50% shooter at 6'7", who can rise up and shoot over defenders, and I think that really lowers the margin for error. But we'll see. We got, who knows? The transfer portal is there. All right, we've got, I think Penn State's entire starting five is in the transfer portal. There's a couple of good players there. One of Indiana's best players just went in to the transfer portal. He would be the kind of player that could add some grit for a team like an Iowa. So we'll see. A lot of these rosters are going to get major makeovers with the transfer portal in the next few months. So you got to put that in. You can't be too premature yet in looking at how good teams will be for next season. You're going to have to wait a few months for that. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of Bigger 10. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Bigger 10 to keep up to date on what we think all things Big 10 in between episodes. You can also like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, share, whichever the case may be on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, right here if you're watching on YouTube. Keep that positive feedback coming. For Aaron McIntire, I'm Steve Deace. Until the next time, right here on Bigger 10.